There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch, Michael Byler.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, and with me tonight is retired detective and straight out of Brooklyn, Phil Grimaldi. How you doing tonight, Phil?
Doing pretty good, Billy. How you doing?
Pretty good. You know, it's what the old expression, what goes around comes around. Here we are. We first started covering this case of the Alec Murdaugh case. I believe it was June 7th, 2021, more than a year and a half ago. And that's how long this case has taken to come to trial. And since then, it's been like the National Enquirer, it's been like People Magazine, it's been like every possible thing that can happen in this small South Carolina town has occurred. The twists and turns in this case are just incredible, just things that you can't believe this. When we always say that truth is much stranger than fiction, that happens to be the truth, that real life is much more unbelievable than things that writers can make up. I don't think a writer could make this up because it would be seen as outrageous that couldn't happen. But guess what? It did happen, and it does happen. What do you think, Phil?
Yes, absolutely. This case, right from the beginning, as we had stated, has all the salacious details of almost like a soap opera. And again, you're making a point, Billy, that even a good writer couldn't put all of the components together that are involved in this case. You have a 3 or 4 generation dynasty in South Carolina with the Murdaugh family. They actually controlled the prosecutor's office for a number of years. When the case first started, within a few weeks of all of the different things that went on, I'm talking about from the time of the double homicide, the actual prosecutor had to recuse himself from the investigation based on the fact that he must have had personal contact and friendship with the Murdaugh family. So again, it sounds like something right out of a great novel or a made-for-television movie. And who knows, maybe down the line, there will be books written or television projects done on this case.
There's so many things in regards to the timeline. I want to go through it rather quickly. The criminal case against Alex Murdaugh, the former lawyer accused of killing his wife and son, is part of a web of accusations, investigations, and lawsuits that have accompanied the downfall of a member of South Carolina's most prominent dynasties. Mr. Murdaugh was for years a well-known lawyer specializing in civil litigation. His family law firm, based in the tiny town of Hampton, was considered a powerhouse on the state plaintiff's bar, and his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather had all served as the top prosecutors across a wide region of the state. Here's a timeline of the major events related to this case. July 8th, 2015, the body of Stephen Smith, 19, was found on Sandy Run Road in Hampton County, South Carolina. His death was ruled a hit and run, but his family had lingering questions. February 26, 2018, Gloria Satterfield, 57, worked as a housekeeper and a nanny for the Murdaugh family for about a quarter of a century, died about 2 weeks after she was reported to have fallen on the front stairs of the family's hunting property. February 14th, 2019, Alec Murdaugh's younger son, Paul, who was then 19, drunkenly crashed the family boat into a bridge, and he threw some of his passengers into the water. The body of one passenger, Mallory Beach, 19, was found a week later. Miss Beach's parents would later sue Alec Murdaugh, bringing pressure on him to reveal details of his finances. April 18, 2019, Paul Murdaugh was charged with 3 felony counts in connection with the deadly boat crash. He later pled guilty. June 7, 2021, Mr. Murdaugh called 911 to report that his wife, Maggie, and son Paul had been shot at the family's hunting property in Island Town, a rural hamlet about 65 miles west of Charleston. June 22nd, state officials announced that they were reopening investigations into the death of Mr. Smith, the teenager who died in 2015, based on information gathered during investigations into the murders of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh. It just doesn't end. It just continues and continues. One of the things we need to recognize is that Alec Murdaugh was on the scene of the death of his wife and his son, Paul. He tried to cover it up in many ways, but he couldn't hide that his cell phone was there. He made up several different alibis. Both weapons used were owned by the Murdaugh family. There's other smoking gun type information. But right now, of course, the attorneys are doing battle. They're going to war over this and what did happen, what didn't happen. Of course, Alec Murdaugh has a top attorney who's also been in South Carolina society, friend of the Clintons. He's 74 years old. You can see he's a crusty old attorney, but you can see he's very good.
Yes, Billy. I did see him on the news earlier today, and I watched some of the opening statement yesterday by the prosecutor, who's actually the Attorney General of South Carolina, or works for the Attorney General's office. He did note several things, like you said. The cell phone technology is going to place Alec Murdaugh in and around the location where the murders took place. At the time we believe the murders took place, he obviously called 911, so he put himself there at some point. But we believe the murders took place before that, and his cell phone's going to place him there. There's also going to be forensic evidence they talked about with regard to clothing that was found at the location. So again, all of the pieces of evidence will come together. Like you stated, the guns were owned by the Murdaugh family. The area was a dog kennel where the murders actually took place on a property. I guess you could consider it some type of a hunting lodge, they called it. So again, probably very secluded. The reason that Maggie and Paul were there is really not determined as of yet. Perhaps it'll come out why they were at the location. But with all of the different things that are noted in previous to the homicide, regarding Alec Murdaugh, that he had a very severe drug problem, financial issues. The son was involved in the boating accidents. There was the cover up of the Satterfield case where he embezzled money from an insurance policy that was paid out based on the death of the housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield. On and on we go. He was shortly after the double homicide, he was disbarred as an attorney in the state of South Carolina based on embezzling money from the law firm that he worked for. And he was actually fired from the law firm subsequent to that. Statements were made by the law firm that they didn't condone any of the behavior that was exhibited by Alec Murdaugh. So again, if you take all of those things, put all these components together, plus the wife had visited with and consulted with a divorce attorney prior to the double homicide, I don't think we have that far to go to stretch to believe that the person that is being charged with the case, Alec Murdaugh, is the one responsible for the double homicide.
This is from court today.
That there was a theory that Paul had shot his mother and then shot himself. Is that correct? That's out on the scene.
Yes.
She had been shot multiple times, and he had been shot with a shotgun. At least one of the shots, we all believe, was upward. That's why his brains were all over the ceiling.
That part I don't know. I wasn't involved in that part.
At the scene.
I did not discuss anything being shot upward. I don't recall saying that.
Did you hear discussions to that of your fellow officers?
Of a shot being fired upward? That's what it looked like they were saying, yes.
Okay. And further, I think in front of you, one of the officers saying that brains are on the ceiling, there's blood all over the place, correct?
I don't recall them saying brain was upward. I don't recall.
You know, folks, watching this, you also have to realize on the screen was Alec Murdaugh. While this horrendous testimony is being given by an investigator, a detective, and don't you believe for 1 second he's not coached in how to act. How would you act when you're hearing that your son's brains was splattered all over the place? How are you going to act when that's read back to you? And the point being also is that potentially, I mean, he's the guy that did it, you know, so how would, I mean, if you believe he's guilty, how would you act? How was he told to act by his attorney? So all of these horrendous things are coming out in the courtroom, and there are cameras in the courtroom. A lot of you folks talk about that you think it's a good thing. I personally think it's a bad thing, but that's not my choice in this case. Here we have cameras in the courtroom, and Alec Murdaugh is coached, of course, by his attorney. When you hear this type of testimony, you better react to it. And you could see he put his head down. He almost feigned tears. And that's all the show for the jury.
You know, Billy, I agree with you about the cameras in the courtroom. I'm not a big fan of that. It does make for good news and television. You know, it's very salacious, this case. Most cases that have been, public with the cameras, they just, I don't know if the person that's being charged with the crime actually gets a fair trial based on that. There's a little bit too much, coverage on the facts of the case, and perhaps it could start conspiracy theories and things like that. So I agree with you on that. One of the things that I wanted to make a point about, they're talking about, and I believe it was introduced by the defense, that possibly it was a murder-suicide. Now, when the prosecutor opened yesterday, he described how they believed that the son, Paul, was shot in the chest with the shotgun, and then the next shot was under his chin, which obviously blew out the top of his head and blew his brain right out of his skull. So again, based on that fact, did he shoot and kill his mother, aim the gun at himself, shoot himself in the chest, sustain a gunshot wound to the chest, and then take the gun and put it under his chin? I doubt that very, very highly. Just doesn't sound likely, probable, or possible to me. So I think that them putting that out there, again, you don't have to, when you're defending a client that's accused of a double homicide, you don't have to prove his innocence. You just have to create doubt in the prosecution's case. It's the burden of proof is on the prosecution to prove that you're guilty of the charges that they're bringing against you.
Phil, you know, scientifically, really good crime scene technicians, crime scene experts, and I think it was SLED, that's South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, were the lead people in this case. You could imagine that even the local police department could be compromised. The power of this law firm that had the specter over this entire area, when people in this town are asked to be interviewed by the press, they're like, no, I don't want to be interviewed. Why? Because of the power of the Murdaugh family. And they come right out and say that. I don't want to say something and I'm done in this town, you know? So you can just see it goes back over 100 years. When they talk about the family, they were the district attorneys. They called them the Solicitor General down in South Carolina, but they were the district attorneys for this area for 100 years. And then they branched off into law. They were a super powerful law firm. I can just imagine how many other acts of deceit and theft and fraud were connected to this law firm over all those years. Alec has been accused of stealing over $8 million. Who else had their hands in the till?
Absolutely, Billy. And when you look at all the cases that you went through in the timeline, you know, that's going back to 2015 with the Gloria Satterfield case. I'm sorry, the Stephen Smith case, then the Gloria Satterfield case in 2018. 2019 is the boating accident. So those are just some of the things that happened prior to the double homicide. Again, he was being charged outside of this case with numerous felonies based on embezzling money from different clients. So I think, Alec Murdaugh checked off all of the boxes of the unethical things that you can do as attorney. He checked just about every one of them off, embezzling money from clients, stealing from the firm, on and on. And obviously now being charged with this double homicide. We've talked about it, Bill, off the air, that we've heard so many different components of his life. The only thing that we think is missing, and it may be there, we just haven't heard about it, would be what we call in Brooklyn a gumata, a girlfriend. The only angle that hasn't been checked off, so to speak. We have the money angle, the drugs. The only thing that we haven't found is was he carrying on a love affair or some type of a sexual affair with somebody other than his wife. I'm sure that if it's out there, it's going to come out.
Well, I think the big elephant in the room is his drug addiction. And he actually used that to try to get out from under it early on in this case. I just want to go back to the timelines because some folks were talking about an incident. I didn't want to read them all at once because there's so many of them. On August 11th, Duffy Stone, the region's top prosecutor, recused himself from the June 7th murder. So again, he wrote a letter to the state attorney general, Alan Wilson, whose office is now prosecuting the case. So they couldn't have a local prosecutor prosecute that. September 3rd, 2021, Mr. Murdaugh was forced to resign from his family law firm after his partner said that he had misused millions of dollars in client and firm money. September 4th, Mr. Murdaugh called 911 from the side of a road not far from his home and said that he had been shot in the head. He claimed that the shooter had pulled up beside him as he was inspecting a flat tire. Mr. Murdaugh survived with a head wound. September 6th, Mr. Murdaugh released a statement to his lawyers saying he had made decisions he regretted and was entering a rehab program. September 14th, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division said Mr. Murdaugh had admitted that he asked a former client, Curtis Edward Smith, to shoot and kill him on September 4th so that Mr. Murdaugh's surviving son, Richard, who is known as Buster, could collect a $10 million insurance payment. There's more, guys. There's more, but I'm going to stop right there with that. So you could just see it. This is a soap opera. I mean, how many things could this guy do? He hires someone to shoot him in the head so that his other son, his youngest son, Buster, who was implicated in the Stephen Smith murder, apparently they have information that made them believe that the Murdaugh family was involved in that. They found that out during the investigation of the death of Margie and Paul Murdaugh. They found more information that implicated Buster potentially. And I don't want to speak out of school, but this is the information that we're getting. So as you could see, soap opera upon soap opera. And it's just, when you talk about the power of this family, it can silence a lot of people.
Absolutely, Billy. And, I'm going to just go back to what you were just talking about. On June 22nd, 2021, the State Law Enforcement Division, also known as SLED, opens a homicide investigation. In that case, that's the Stephen Smith case, originally was a hit and run. It was handled as an accident by the Highway Patrol. It says here that homicide investigation into the death of Stephen Smith as a result of information obtained during the double murder of Alex's wife and son, Paul and Maggie. So again, what was uncovered during the investigation that led SLED to open a homicide investigation? That was considered an accident, a hit and run, a motor vehicle accident back in 2015. However, information was uncovered, and now they're investigating that case as a homicide. Who's going to be charged in a homicide in that case? I'd like to know. I wonder what that investigation, what stage that investigation's at. But again, all the different salacious things that are going on in and around this perpetrator, this defendant, Alec Murdaugh, very, very questionable character, zero integrity, in my opinion. So again, his lawyer is going to paint him as a loving father and family man. However, I think the opposite is true. He has no integrity in my eyes, and I think that can easily be proven and brought about at this trial.
What you might ask, what does an attorney and what does a prosecutor do in a case like this? They're facing off. They're all presenting their point of view as to what occurred. And then there's a thing, of course, called evidence, which evidence could be a slam dunk in this case. And I know we get the people point at us and say, you guys are just pro-prosecution. Well, this case happens to have a huge amount of evidence. Let me just play a little bit of this here.
Pow, pow. 2 shots, abdomen in the leg, and took her down.
Arguing two very different versions of the same story.
He didn't do it. He didn't kill Butcher, his son and wife.
Dramatic descriptions of his family's deaths at point bringing Murdaugh to tears. Opening statements given to a jury of 8 women and 4 men who will spend the next several weeks following the evidence.
They were shot at close range and they did not have defensive wounds.
Prosecutors say forensics will prove Murdaugh's guilt after a perfect storm of circumstances came to a head. The state contends Maggie was killed with a weapon owned by the family that was never recovered, and that a cell phone video captured at the murder scene just before the time of deaths puts Alec at the scene, contradicting his alibi that he only reached there when he discovered the bodies.
And he was there just minutes before, with Maggie and Paul, just minutes before their cell phones go silent forever.
But the defense argues there's no forensic evidence to tie Murdaugh to the murders. No fingerprints, eyewitnesses, murder weapons, and despite the gruesome scene, no blood on Alec when police arrive.
You would be covered in blood from head to foot.
The defense argues a video taken earlier in the evening shows Paul and Alec enjoying time together, and that police pinned Alec as a suspect before investigating, even suggesting the crime may have been the work of 2 people because 2 different weapons were used.
They have pounded that square peg in the round hole, and you're going to hear about it. They've ignored some witnesses.
Katie, it appeared to be a difficult day in court. Is there any indication that the rest of Alec Murdaugh's family is still supporting him?
Well, Lester, for the first time today, we saw several members of the Murdaugh family in the courtroom, including his son, Buster. When court adjourned, Murdaugh turned to his son and mouthed the words, "Are you okay?" His son.
So, guys, you could see, I mean, 2 different presentations, the prosecutor and the defense. And some of the things that, to me, that the video that puts him on the scene is so powerful. He's on the scene early, but we're supposed to believe that he left before the killings, and it was so close to the killings. The other thing is that the weapons belonged to the Murdaugh family. I don't know why they're saying they weren't recovered. Apparently they were recovered on the scene. And then there is some ballistic evidence and there is some blood evidence. Apparently there's an overcoat with gunshot residue on it. They just haven't presented it yet. Just like as we talk about the Idaho case, they haven't presented all their evidence yet. There is lots of evidence in this case.
Billy, 2 things. I want to make a point. One, I want to take exception with that. Defense attorney said that based on the crime scene, he should be covered in blood. No, I believe that the shots were fired from a distance far enough away where there could be very minute particles of blood, some blowback, maybe gunshot residue on his clothing, which I believe they are going to introduce gunshot residue. Outside in an open area, I think the likelihood of getting blood on your clothing when you're up close shooting someone is not as great as if you're in an enclosed area. It's got to do with obvious, just the environment that you're in. The concussion would blow back. If there's a wall behind the person you're shooting, it would come back at you. So again, out in the open, I doubt very highly he'd be covered in blood as that defense attorney described. The other thing with regard to the weapons, Billy, I believe that only one of the weapons was recovered, but they said that the caliber of the other weapon, it wasn't recovered, was one of the guns that they did own. That gun is now missing, I believe. I'm not sure about that 100%. Like I said, I think that's what I heard when I was listening to some of the trial today, that the one gun wasn't recovered. So that could be.
Well, Les Pony, thank you for the 1999 super chat. How big is this web of criminals? It's big. It's real big. And the power, that's the thing you always hear people say from the academic world. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And, think of the power they have. Look, they had to have the state attorney general prosecute this case because the local prosecutor is compromised. And he admitted it. He said, I can't prosecute this case because I know everyone. I know everyone so well. Well, Les Pony, also thank you so much for being a channel member. We really appreciate that. I just want to go back to the gunshot and what the defense attorney was saying, gunshots. There's something called bloodstain pattern analysis. And if you're standing back from someone and you shoot them with a shotgun, think of momentum and centrifugal force. It's going to be on behind them, not in front of them. Can blood spatter forward? Yes, but the majority of the blood is going to be behind.
Exactly.
And it's going to create what's called bloodstain pattern analysis. And there's three types. There's high, medium, and low. This is definitely going to be high impact analysis because it's caused by the speed of a speeding bullet, of a speeding round. In this case, I think the shotgun had pellets. So the gunshot residue and the bloodstain pattern analysis, if there was a wall behind him, it would be all over the wall and it would be spread out because pellets are being used. There could be as many as 16 or 18 or 20 pellets in that shotgun, depending on the buck load that it was. So the defense attorney is not being correct when he says, oh, he didn't have any blood. The bloodstain pattern analysis would be behind him.
Absolutely, Billy. I think that was an excellent description of what we feel would be if you were shot with a shotgun blast. Now, like you said, there are different types of shotgun shells. There's a slug shell. There's a 00 buck, which is 9 balls, basically, like you described, pellets. And then there's birdshot, which is a whole bunch of little BBs. I believe that the shotgun blast that Paul took was the 00 buck, which is the balls. They're almost like ball bearings. I believe it's usually most of the rounds that I'm familiar with are 9 of those BBs, those ball bearing type rounds. So again, the blood would be away from the victim. If there was an enclosed area like a small room, perhaps some of it could splash back towards the perpetrator. But again, that description by that defense attorney that he should be covered in blood, 100% not the case in my opinion. And I've seen plenty of homicides where people were shot, and I just disagree with him wholeheartedly on that.
You know, we had a guy on 125th Street, and he owned a refrigerator store. And these 4 mopes went into the store with one gun, but they started pistol whipping his employees in a stick-up. And I remember the guy's name was Gus. He was an old guy, like 72, 73 years old. And he had this shotgun that he kept in a box for 20, 25 years, never touched it, but just in case something like this happened. He shot all 4 of them. 2 of them dead, and 2 of them ran out and they went to a hospital, said they were robbed, you know? But the point is that he didn't have a drop of blood on him. And he shot 4 people, 2, as I said, 2 dead and 2 wounded.
And that's inside of a store, Billy, not in an open area. This shooting took place outside in an open area on a hunting lodge by a dog kennel. So again, he was that individual you're talking about, that case, he shot 4 people and he didn't have a drop of blood on him. Again, out in the open, the chances of you having blood splash back at you, I think is much, much less. So yeah, that defense attorney's description of that, I hope that either in summation or some type of crime scene expert can testify about that statement that he made. You know, obviously experienced law enforcement officers, crime scene investigators can make statements about that. And then you can get into the scientific explanation of it based on the patterns that you talked about earlier, Billy.
The other thing that to me, and I wish Mike Geary was here because we'd use his expression, consciousness of guilt.
There we go.
Was that he called 911. He was the 911 caller. And he said, oh, my wife and son are shot very badly. That was the language he used. They're shot very badly. And the 911 operator asked him his name and where he was. He gave all that. He said,
it was actually a pretty long 911 call.
Yes, my name is Alec Murdaugh.
Yes.
We're at this address. And he said, please get here fast. And that they're not moving. They don't look like they're alive. They don't look like they're alive. He said all of those things. The other thing he did, which is another consciousness of guilt, was he called his wife's cell phone after the shooting as an alibi. to show that he thought she was alive, which is another consciousness of guilt thing. We'll give Mike Geary credit for that,
And we also have a red herring thrown in there by using the two different firearms, again, to maybe possibly plant the seed in the investigators' minds that two different guns, two different shooters. If you go back to that 911 call and you listen to it, now the description of the crime scene by the prosecutor, describing how the son Paul's head was basically his brain was blown right out of his head. He doesn't indicate anything of that nature. He's kind of saying, well, they're shot badly. And, the 911 operator is asking if they're breathing. And he's saying, I'm not sure. I mean, even in a state of shock, I think you would be able to, looking at that crime scene, understand and come to the conclusion that your son is dead. I mean, brain blown out of his head. And from the description that I saw on one of the news shows, only the front of his face was left. So again, if you listen to that 911 call, it sounds so staged. It sounds phony. He's on the phone for quite some time. It took the police a few minutes to get there. Like I said, it was in a rural area, this hunting lodge. So with all of those things put together, I think if he was literally stumbling upon his wife and son killed by someone else, he would have been much more frantic, would have probably, said, no, they appear to be dead. I think that really says a lot. And I'm sure that 911 call is going to be played at the trial. And, the jury will come to their own conclusions on that.
Folks, one of the things that we're also leaving out here is that the son who he's alleged to have shot and killed, his name was Paul Murdaugh. He was the one that was driving the family boat, intoxicated, because they have video of him going to a bar drinking, and they had already been drinking all day. And he crashed the boat into a bridge, and a 19-year-old girl was ejected out of the boat into the water, and her body wasn't found for like about a week. So her family was suing them. And that may have been part of the motive for Alec Murdaugh to kill his son, that he felt that he was going to try to get out from underneath this lawsuit, which of course was not going to happen anyway. And his son apparently had already pled guilty. Whether he was going to go to prison for this or not, we don't know. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. If you like real crime stories from a police perspective, you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, please go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and ring that bell. Share us with your friends, your family. Make comments. We love to see comments on our videos, and we love to respond. We also have a Patreon with 3 different levels. If you want to support us financially, you can go on our Patreon. We also have a YouTube channel members with 5 different levels, and you can support us in that way. We appreciate all our subs, our fans, and our friends on Police Off the Cuff. So, one of the things also I wanted to bring back up, we're not done with the timeline. I didn't want to read it all at once because it would just be crazy. He was also arrested and charged with fraud and conspiracy in that suicide scheme where he hired that Curtis Edward Smith to shoot him in the head. His lawyer said that Mr. Murdaugh was depressed by the loss of his family and struggling to stop abusing painkillers when he devised this plan, and that he could check into rehab. A judge released Mr. Murdaugh, but ordered him to surrender his passport. Mr. Murdaugh was arrested on October 14th, 2021 at a Florida drug detoxification center and charged with swindling millions of dollars from the sons of Miss Satterfield. That's the housekeeper who died in their house. He was jailed in Richland County, South Carolina, and twice denied bond. During a hearing, a judge set bond at $7 million. Mr. Murdaugh's lawyer said his client had agreed to pay $4.3 million to Satterfield's family. He remained in jail. The police said they planned to exhume Miss Satterfield's body, having received permission from her family. June 28th, Mr. Murdaugh, this is 2022, Mr. Murdaugh and Mr. Smith were indicted by the state's grand jury on 2 conspiracy counts, including a narcotics count related to the painkiller oxycodone. July 14th, 2022, Mr. Murdaugh was indicted on 2 counts of murder. Prosecutors said he fatally shot his wife with a rifle and his son with a shotgun. July 20th, 2022, Mr. Murdaugh pled not guilty at a bond hearing, and his lawyers said he wanted to go to trial as soon as possible. December 16th, 2022, a state grand jury indicted Mr. Murdaugh on 9 counts of tax evasion, and prosecutors with the state attorney general's office said he had defrauded a range of people of about $8.8 million. And of course, January 23rd, the trial has begun. So that's a sort of a
What a
lengthy,
timeline, Billy.
Oh
What a
my God.
timeline. My
what a
God.
lengthy list. I mean, you need a scorecard to stay up on this because it's really too much to really believe. And as I said, and I've said repeatedly, is that if this was a TV series, you'd accuse the writers of being sensational.
Absolutely, Billy. You know what? Let's talk a little bit about this Curtis Edward Smith. Now, he has been described as a former client, a friend, a relative of Alec Murdaugh. He's implicated in the alleged shooting. Now, right off the bat, when the shooting took place, you and I both called it out. We knew that the vehicle in question had run flat tires. They found I believe it was a broken pocket knife or something to that effect that was thrown on the side where the vehicle was found, with the flat tire, although the tire could have been driven on and he was allegedly changing the flat tire. I don't know how much I believe that Alec hired Curtis to shoot him and kill him, because to me, I think if that were the case, he'd be dead. He suffered a very superficial graze wound. I believe that Curtis Edward Smith is going to testify against Murdaugh in this case, in this homicide case. So again, I'd like to hear what he's going to have to say. I believe he's involved way more in all of the hanky-panky that Alec is involved in than we know. I mean, basically, he's only charged in the cover-up shooting, when he's changing the flat tire. But who knows what?
Phil, you're forgetting something about the flat tire. He had tires that wouldn't go flat.
Right, run flats.
So that was just a total nonsensical story. The other thing is all of a sudden he's hurt and a helicopter shows up on the scene and takes him to a hospital in another state.
Right.
How did that happen?
Right.
How did that happen?
Right. And they wanted to get him out of there as soon as possible so that way he wouldn't have to face investigators. Of course, in the early stages of anything like that, just the simple questions might implicate him or catch him in a lie. They didn't want that. They wanted him out of there. Again, I knew about those tires because I had the same type of tires. I've driven 40 miles on a flat tire with those type of tires. So it was all staged. It was all phony. We knew it right from the beginning. It took a few days before it was revealed to the public, and I'm sure the investigators were right on top of that. But this guy, this Curtis Edward Smith, he's a real he's a real intricate part of this case that we're going to find that information from him. I guarantee he has a very shady background, and allegedly he also supplied Alec with some narcotics, the oxycodone. So he probably has access to all of the skeletons, or not all of them, perhaps some of the skeletons in Alec Murdaugh's closets.
Absolutely. Here's some questioning of one of the, he's actually called corporal. There's corporals of police down there. We don't have them in New York City, corporals, but let's hear some of the questioning.
I'm assigned to road patrol, the K9 handler.
Okay, and can you just give us a quick background of who you are, where you grew up, and how you ended up in your career in law enforcement?
Sure. I grew up in Colleton County, went to Colleton County High School, went to college at Tri-County Technical College, where I studied criminal justice. Once I reached age, I came home, was hired by Colleton County Sheriff's Office, left for a couple of years to go work for Jasper County, and then came back to Colleton. I've been assigned to road patrol at Colleton.
All right. And what year did you first start working for Colleton County Sheriff's Department, or began your law enforcement career?
2016.
And what's your current, you said you're a corporal now, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And what is your current assignment? What are your duties?
I'm still assigned to road patrol. I'm a K9 handler.
All right. You say K9. Explain to the jury what that is.
So I have a K-9 that is assigned to me. We respond to certain calls, or if we're requested by another deputy for narcotics searches for suspects, things of that matter.
All right. K9 is a dog, correct?
That's correct.
All right. What's your dog's name?
Evo.
Eva. What kind of dog is Eva?
He's a Belgian Malinois.
Malinois?
Yep.
Is that kind of like a German Shepherd?
Kind of short-haired, pointy ears.
Okay. Short hair, pointy ears. Is Evo typically with you when you're out on patrol?
Yes, sir.
Was Evo with you?
The night of June 7th, 2021.
Yes, sir.
Were you a corporal then at that time?
No, sir. I was deputy.
And who was on the squad that you were on?
Sergeant Daniel Green, Corporal Lisa Janicki, myself, and Deputy Cody Pruitt.
So who was your immediate supervisor?
It would have been Corporal Janicki.
Okay. And then above that is
Sergeant Green.
All right, and then above.
So we're just, I don't want to play the whole thing. This is the prosecution questioning this. He's only a 6-year veteran. He's in his 7th year. Young guy. He's in the K9 unit. They were the responders to the shooting. I mean, there's got to be, again, as the evidence starts being put forward, we'll be able to make a better assessment. But right now, I believe that they have a great deal of evidence at this murder scene. The ballistics evidence, the blood spatter, one of the guns was recovered. It's at a property, a hunting lodge that is owned by the Murdaugh family. So all of this is going to slowly come out. And we see what the prosecutor's trying to lay down a foundation. And at the same time, the defense is trying to create doubt. There's no way this guy did this, that type of thing. And I don't know. We don't know right now. We spoke about this before, Phil, off camera. Are they going to be able to use the fact that he stole over $8 million in this murder case?
Billy, I don't think they'll be able to bring that out in the case because he hasn't been convicted of it. So I think that might be prejudicial. I'm sure his lawyers will argue it and the judge will decide. But, when you're looking at the testimony of that police officer, now, I don't know how many trials that police officer or that corporal has testified at. But again, a double homicide, high profile case. There's a lot of reporters in the courtroom. So there's a big audience. There's a jury. It's quite intimidating when you have to get up there and give testimony about things that you did at the scene. Now, one of the things that I saw, one of the questions, I'm not sure if it was that particular officer, but there was another first responding officer. He was asked about tire tracks. Did he note tire tracks in the area where the bodies were found? And he said, yes, he did note that. And they asked him what he did to preserve the tire tracks or, photographed them, cataloged them. And he said he didn't do anything. So that was one of the things that the defense attorney zeroed in on. What do you mean you didn't do anything? How could you just leave that there? Was there a separate set of tire tracks? So now, again, the defense attorney's job is to create doubt. The officer answered saying, well, that's not my job. However, maybe his inexperience in court testimony, he could have said, it was brought to the attention of the crime scene unit. Perhaps they were the ones that photographed it, cataloged it, or took the imprints, something of that nature. But again, a little thing like that where the officer said, well, that wasn't my job. Oh, it wasn't your job, officer? Whose job was it? You had evidence of something that was a very, very important, at a double homicide scene, and you didn't think it was important enough that it wasn't your job. So again, these are the type of things that defense attorneys will do. And if you catch one juror that says, you know what, maybe he's right, and there's your doubt, you could wind up with a hung jury, which, again, this is early on. There's going to be a lot more evidence in this case. I don't think that that's the way this thing is going to go. But these are the things that happen in criminal proceedings when you're testifying in court. And again, the defense attorney, I'm not trying to knock him. He's doing his job. He's making a point about something that could be, very, very important. Perhaps the tire tracks are of Alec Murdaugh's vehicle, but was there another set of tire tracks, maybe from an unknown perpetrator? So those are the things that will be brought out in a case like this. Again, just to bring doubt into the mind of one of the jurors, perhaps several of them.
Absolutely.
State your name area last week?
First name Tanish, last name Bryson Smith, Bryson hyphen Smith.
You're getting an echo, Bill. Maybe take us out.
Could you tell the jury where you work?
Hampton County E911,
And how long have you worked for Hampton County E911?
17 years.
And what is E911?
Emergency Services Dispatch Center.
And what do you do there?
Currently, I am in a direct position, just stated in December. I am over the management of day-to-day operations of the 911 Dispatch Center for Hampton County, including budgeting, payroll, like the day-to-day operations, and record keeping, recordings, etc.
Does the Hampton County 911 keep records in the normal course of business?
We do.
And what kind of recordings are these?
We have audio recordings from 911 phone calls, administrative line phone calls, as well as video recordings from our radios from the field.
Are all 911 calls recorded?
They are.
And how are these calls stored?
They're stored on our NextLog data recording systems.
How long are they stored for?
As long as we need them.
And who has access to those records?
I do.
Does anybody else?
No, ma'am.
Just you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And how do you access the records?
There is a database in my office that I have to log into to access any recordings that is requested.
All right. Sometimes do calls from another county, such as Colleton County, come into Hampton County?
They do.
And why does that happen?
Cell phones pick up on the nearest PSAP based upon the location of that cell phone at the time of call. PSAP meaning Public Safety Answering System.
Okay. And why does it pick up on that, on the location, and send it to Hampton as opposed to Colleton?
Due to the geographical location of a phone call or a phone when that call is made, that cell phone picks up at that tower, and the tower, wherever the nearest PSAP is where that cell phone will be routed to.
And what do you do when you in Hampton County receive a call from Colleton that's supposed to be going to Colleton County?
We transfer that call out to Colleton County.
So interesting, because it can also show that where the call emanated from.
Right.
So our testimony is quite important, even though I don't think they play the actual recording here, but we had heard the call that Alec Murdaugh had made over a year and a half ago, when he had called 911 and said, my son has been shot very badly. That was the language he used, which I thought was a little bit unusual. Put it that way.
Yeah, he didn't seem to be, I don't know, I try to think of, God forbid, if I stumbled upon a relative, I mean, my wife or one of my children, God forbid, I don't think I could be as, together as he was, even though, he sounded like he was upset or whatever, but frantic, I don't think he was quite frantic. And again, describing the injuries, shot very badly. The 911 operator, by the way, did a great job telling him not to touch things when, it was clear that it was a crime scene, and telling him, reassuring him that the police run away and stuff like that. But asking if they were breathing, obviously to try and institute first aid if there was possible that they were still alive. He's not clear on that. And that's the thing that sticks with me. I mean, if you see a person with their brain blown out of their head, I think it's clear that they're not alive anymore. And he put on a facade. Obviously, it was all an act, and not very good acting, in my opinion.
No, absolutely. But again, that besides the ballistic evidence and the evidence of the gunshot wounds tell a story themselves. If the firearm was fired very close to the body, there's something called stippling or gunshot residue. And the stippling, depending on how close or how distance away, if it's far enough away, the stippling won't exist at all. Right. If it's within 2 feet, the stippling from the barrel of the gun, which is just tiny particles of gunshot residue that would splatter over the body of the victim. That would indicate to the ballistics expert how close the person was when they fired the shot. As I said, if it was beyond 2 feet, then there would be no gunshot residue on the person's body. But that's part of the science of ballistics, which is the science of a projectile in motion, which is what the definition and of ballistics is. And there would be an in-depth investigation of the scene, probably using lasers, probably using all kinds of high technology stuff, because they knew that this was, well, not just that it was a high profile case, but it was a double murder.
Absolutely, Billy. And I just want to expand a little bit on what you talked about with the stippling. When the muzzle flash, now people know what muzzle flash is generally. You watch television, you see a gunfire, there's a flash. That is, there's an explosion that takes place inside of the firearm, and all of the gases in the flame are expelled out through the muzzle of the firearm or the barrel. So again, like you said, if you're within 2 feet of that person, there could be stippling, gunshot residue. It's commonly referred to also as tattooing. And if you have what's known as a contact wound where the barrel of the gun or the muzzle of the gun is placed up against the person's body, you will have a ring from the it's also on the outside of the skin and superficially as well. You'll see an indentation, almost like a black and blue or a bruising of the skin. That's indicative of a contact wound. They're all the different types of gunshot wounds that we talk about on the show in the past. So I believe in the opening statements by the prosecutor, he did talk about stippling, that we were going to see some stippling in this case, that one or maybe more of the shots that were fired at the victims were of close nature. So again, could there be blowback towards the perpetrator? Yes, there can. Would they be covered in blood as the defense attorney described? I don't think so.
No, when you described tattooing, I once had this idiot that shot himself in the hand, and it was a perfect circular imprint in his hand, as well as gunshot residue, and the actual tattooing of the imprint of the barrel of the firearm, the muzzle of the firearm in his hand. And his story was, I was walking across the projects and I heard gunfire, and then I realized I got hit. It was totally ridiculous. We actually locked him up for possession of a weapon, because the evidence was so clear that he had shot himself. Even though we didn't recover the weapon, we charged him anyway. And that's called tattooing, where it has the gunshot residue and the stippling in it. It was just ridiculous. It was like a textbook tattooing from a firearm. Let me play a little bit of this.
Okay. And further, you, as you're discussing this with them, indicate, let me make sure I get this correct. You indicate there are multiple, or someone indicates to you there are multiple blackout rounds around Maggie's body in the vicinity, correct?
Not rounds, but shell casings.
All right, shell casing. Now, let me ask you this. When you got there, didn't the fire chief and the fire department arrive before you did?
No, sir. I was first on scene.
Okay. Did they arrive while you were there?
One of the fire rescue workers, I believe it was Barry McCoy.
And when you got there, we hear unidentified person, and in your notes you indicate it was the fire chief, I believe, that indicated to you, pointed out to you tire tracks, and you went over and looked at those tire tracks, and there were multiple tire tracks coming and going, correct?
I don't know that someone indicated them to me. I believe I just saw them.
Okay. And what did you do to preserve those?
The tire tracks, nothing.
And you certainly are not an expert in tire tracks.
I'm not.
So you couldn't tell what was multiple vehicles or one vehicle?
No.
And it may have been multiple vehicles.
May have been.
Did you take pictures of the tracks?
I did not take any pictures of the scene.
Instruct anyone to take pictures of the tracks?
No, sir, that's not my job.
When SLED arrived, did you tell them about the tracks?
No, sir, not my job.
You were regret not doing that?
It's not part of my job description.
So what's your job to even tell them there were multiple tire tracks?
If it had come up, if I had
Phil, that's what you were referring to for that, and that was not a good look. That's not my job. That's not the proper answer to give if you're a professional law enforcement officer.
See, it's funny because the attorney walked him into something that could create a doubt. He said, "Oh, could there have been multiple tire tracks?" And he said, "Yes." So that's one. Two, he asked, "Did you bring it to anybody's attention?" He said, "No." I mean, even though he's not crime scene, he could have brought it to someone's attention. So that's another thing. He probably could have alluded to, crime scene investigators were at the scene and they would take pictures, or they would, catalog that or reference that, or take molding of the tire tracks. And again, the defense attorney could ask him, "Do you know if in fact that was done?" And he could say, "No, I don't know if it was done. I wasn't present for it," or something of that nature. So I'm not trying to knock the officer, but having experience in a courtroom testimony setting, you wouldn't maybe answer questions of that nature. Again, even though you're being honest with your answer, you're giving ammunition to the defense to create doubt, and it's unintentional. You're not intentionally giving them that information. However, if you would have answered it in a different manner, you could have shut that down by saying what I just brought out. Crime scene was present. They're the ones that handle that. He didn't make that point. He just said, "It's not my job." Not a real good answer.
No, it's not a good look. And again, I don't like to criticize the officer, but you get when you've testified a lot at trials, and you've gotten beaten up by a defense attorney, and you've got several times 3, 4, 5, 6 hours on the stand, you sort of learn how to testify, and you can predict where the attorney is going before he even gets there. But if you also notice, here's this experienced attorney. One of the rules of being a good attorney is never to ask a question that you don't know the answer to, because if the answer is different than what you're expecting, you can look very stupid also. And he had said something about, were there multiple rounds on the scene? I think that was the terminology used. And the officer corrected him and said, no, there were spent shell casings. So he used incorrect terminology also, but he's not the one that's he's the one that's trying to create the doubt, not the reverse.
Absolutely, Billy. And that was actually a very good answer on that officer's part, because he corrected, it's not a round, it's a spent shell casing. Very good point. The other thing is this: you brought out the point, and he's an experienced prosecutor, defense attorney. So again, how many times does an officer who's got 7 years on the job testify in such a high profile double homicide case? Probably not very often. Maybe he's in traffic court. Maybe he's testifying on some minor offensive cases. But again, to be so schooled on it as the defense attorney is, they do mock trials in law school. They go through the experience of questioning and leading a witness. And, it's up to the judge to control what goes on in the courtroom. But a defense attorney, a good defense attorney, can, make things sound a little bit different than what the actual person answering the question wants it to sound like, or their answer. And I've had it happen where they'll ask you the same question with different wording, but it's the same. They want you to, repeat the answer in the hopes that maybe you're going to change your answer. And again, a lot of times the prosecutor will object, and the judge will say, that question has been answered, objections sustained, moved on, things of that nature. Or, if the judge feels that maybe you didn't answer it the way that, the judge wanted it answered, he'll say objection overruled and answer the question. Now you have to answer that question. But that's the thing that defense attorneys will do. They'll try to wear you down. They'll ask you the same question in different ways to try and get a different answer than you made the first time. And then when you answer it differently, they say, officer, detective, didn't you say just in the last few minutes, and I can have it read back, that the answer to that question was no? Now you're saying yes. So again, it tries to create doubt, and they try to impeach your testimony. That's what their job is. And unfortunately, being an officer, an investigator, a detective, you have to be able to sustain and get through that without losing your cool.
Absolutely.
Joe Murray, attorney at law. Speaking of attorneys, have you found yourself in a jam? Are you in need of legal counsel in the New York area? Do you need a victim's advocate? Well, Joe Murray is your man. He's not only an experienced trial attorney, he's also a retired 15-year member of the NYPD. He literally knows both sides of defense. His website is jmurray-law.com. His telephone number is 646-838-1702. Or you can email Joe at joe@jmurray-law.com. Joe's a big supporter of police off the cuff real crime stories. He was actually on Fox News this morning defending a NYPD sergeant who was brought up on charges for wearing a unauthorized patch on her uniform. Good luck to Joe on that case. He's a great criminal attorney.
Folks, we're going to stay on this case. It really is a fascinating case. I can't, I think it had more interest when it first occurred. However, it is a fascinating case, and it is being internationally covered. And it's hard for any of us to believe that a father could kill his own son and his wife. And I'm not saying if Alec Murdaugh is innocent to proven guilty. He probably has some of the best defense counsel that money can buy right now. I don't know who's paying for it. Is his family still paying for it? Does he still have money left that he could pay for his own defense? You're talking about a defense like this could very easily cost $500,000. And who's paying for it? I don't know. I really don't know. But we're going to stay with this case. And there's so many other aspects of it. We read part of that timeline, and I thank the New York Times for providing that timeline. There's so many things that have occurred in this case that really point the finger at Alec Murdaugh. Phil, final words.
Final words. You talked about this case involving a family that went all the way back to his great-grandfather. You talk about nepotism, the influence, the favoring of relatives, friends, associates. I mean, think about it. All the favors that must have been done by this family in the past, favorable treatment. Let's just hope for the sake of Maggie Murdaugh and Paul Murdaugh that there's justice done in this case and that there's enough physical evidence, circumstantial evidence, witness testimony, critical cell phone technology testimony, and we can have justice in this case and he can be convicted. Obviously, he's innocent till proven guilty, but with the, I don't know if you want to call it a tidal wave of evidence that we see, he's probably, sitting on a double murder conviction here. Again, we'll keep close eye on it. This really is a salacious case. It has tons of components to it. And it's just like, as we were covering it from early on in 2021, June 2021, it was like every day was a new chapter in the saga. So we'll be on top of it. Let's see what the rest of this trial brings.
Absolutely. Folks, again, if you're not subscribed to Police Off the Cuff, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and ring that bell. Also,
Absolutely.
You can support us on our Patreon, 2 different levels, and we have a YouTube channel membership with 3 different levels. I want to thank all you guys for tuning in tonight, and we'll bring more in regards to this case to you in the upcoming weeks that this trial will be taking place. Have a great night, everyone, and God bless.
Stay safe, everyone.
One episode just ain't enough.